I want to bring in a man who knows a little bit about political challenges, former Obama Press Secretary Josh Earnest, who is also now an MSNBC political analyst. Welcome aboard. Good to see you again, Josh.
Good morning, Chris. How are you?
We are colleagues now instead of on the other side of the podium. Look, I want to get to Nunes in a second, but the president tweeted this morning, so let me read it. Mike Flynn should ask for immunity in that this is a witch hunt excuse for big election loss by media and Dems of historic proportion. This isn't the first time an administration has charged a witch hunt. And in this hyper-politicized environment that we're in now, Josh, does he have a point, or is it a lot of spin?
Well, he would have a point if there weren't nonpartisan federal investigators who are taking a look at this, and Republicans on Capitol Hill who are closely taking a look at Mr. Flynn's actions and the other ties of the administration to Russian officials. Look, I'm sure that after that Wall Street Journal story broke yesterday, indicating that Mr. Flynn was prepared to seek immunity in order to testify, there were some restless nights' sleep here in Washington, D.C.
Do you think so?
Yeah, I do, because I think any Washington, D.C. official, particularly a Trump administration official, who sent an email to General Flynn, who thought they were having a private conversation with General Flynn, or was in a position where they were publicly defending General Flynn, now you have to be concerned that your either private communications are going to become public, or that your efforts to defend him are actually going to be proven false.
So behind the scenes, are people like, oh my God?
Well, if I were them, I would be. And again, I think the tweet from the president, we know that he tweets when he's particularly exercised about something.
Yes.
I think he's right to be particularly exercised about this, because he certainly was in a position of having private conversations with Mr. Flynn, and he certainly was in a position where he was publicly defending him. So is he facing the prospect of having a lot of that be upended? I think he might be. Then
you have Devin Nunes and these revelations about the White House and the people within the White House, in spite of the fact that his spokesperson said it wasn't somebody in the White House. Turns out that it is somebody in the White House. I mean, if they had just handed over the documents, would it have been a big deal? What is it about this that's problematic for the White House?
Well, I think first of all, I think what's problematic for the American people is that you have senior intelligence officials in the National Security Council that are not poring over intelligence reports trying to figure out how to keep the country safe. They're poring over intelligence reports trying to figure out how they can defend an ultimately defenseless tweet that included a baseless accusation from the President of the United States. That's a problem, and that does represent the politicization of the intelligence process. But for the White House, I do think that they have to be concerned, because it looks like they're trying to launder this information through the Republican chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, again, to try to exonerate or at least defend the tweets from the President of the United States. I think most people would expect that people who are in positions of handling sensitive intelligence are trying to hold that, are handling that information and using that information to protect the American people, not to try to protect the political claims of the President of the United States.
Somebody who has handled intelligence for a long time, has had classified information in her hands for a long time, Nancy Pelosi, the House Democratic leader, was on the Today Show this morning. Here's what she had to say.
We really have to take some steps back and hope that in the administration there's some adult someplace who can say this is not fair to the American people.
I will say, in the big picture, let's take the legal part of it and even the political part out of it. And I'm sure, Josh, now that you're back in civilian life, you sense this. There is this sense of unease around America, that there is so much going on and there's so much controversy going on. Is there a way for this White House to take charge of this again, beyond the president tweeting?
Well, they certainly, it's going to be hard for them to separate from this kind of environment, because it seems to be White House officials and even the president himself who's feeding this environment. It is the President of the United States who is sowing chaos, sending these tweets, inviting people to take leadership roles in his administration who also seem to thrive in this kind of environment. I'm referring to his senior advisor, Steve Bannon, who walked in the door vowing to deconstruct the administrative state and to sort of sow this kind of chaos. This is the president's management style, and it certainly is the way that he ran his campaign, and it's not particularly surprising to me that this is the way that he's choosing to run the country. There's a big difference, though, between campaigning and governing. And when you're campaigning, you are operating in a fast-moving political environment, and you're making promises. When you're in government, and particularly when you're at the top of the government, people are relying on you to be a source of stability and to be a source of confidence. And I don't think people are drawing a lot of confidence from the president's leadership right now, and at least the polls would indicate that people aren't drawing a lot of confidence.
And in the midst of all this, the president, who's been going after the Freedom Caucus, is saying, alternatively, I'm going to work with some Democrats. Maybe I can bring some Democrats on board for things like infrastructure, for things things like taxes. Let's be honest. Are there some Democrats, do you think, who are now torn between resisting Trump at all costs as a political move as opposed to actually working perhaps with moderate Republicans and trying to get something done?
Yeah. Well, politically, they don't need to be worried about that because the president's standing in the polls is so low. I don't think they have to be worried about being viewed as cooperating with somebody who is so unpopular already. You know, we're only 8 or 9 weeks into his tenure as president, and he's already reached depths in the polls that President Obama, you know, who had a supposedly divisive presidency, never reached. So I don't think that there's much of a political imperative, but Democrats are, you know, do have this affliction that we actually want government to work. That many Democrats are in public service because they actually believe that government can be a source of good and can actually do good things for the country. So are they going to be interested in trying to cooperate with Republicans to do the right thing for the country? They might be, but that's going to have to start with Republicans actually showing a good faith effort to being interested in talking to Democrats. But as long as Democrats are in a position where Republicans are ignoring them, and you have the Speaker of the House indicating that he's not going to work with Democrats at all to try to pass legislation, and there's no indication that Democrats were consulted by the White House in terms of trying to pass health care reform. So Republicans are going to have to change their strategy dramatically if they're going to make good on this promise to try to work with Democrats.
And since you brought up your old boss, how's he doing? How's he viewing all of this?
Yeah, I think probably with some, viewing it from a distance.
Where he's writing his book.
Yeah, where he's writing a book. But I think that he's genuinely concerned about, he's somebody who was involved in public service because he wanted to see the country succeed. And he certainly viewed the White House and the federal government as an institution that could be used to advance the interests of the American public. There's a sense of a lot of action and movement in Washington, D.C., but not a lot of movement forward. And I think that's a source of some concern, not just for the former President of the United States, but for Americans, both parties all across the country.
Josh Earnest, always good to see you.
Nice
Am I allowed to say that you have a baby on the way? Good luck. Congratulations. Any day now.
We're excited.
Walker's going to get a little sister.
There you go.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris.
And coming up.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.